Today on Locked On Red Wings, our top 10 Detroit Red Wings prospects.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings. What's the matter, Scotty? You're shaking your head.
You were dabbing backstage while the intro was playing.
That's libel, slander, whichever one's spoken word. You can't prove that.
That's absurd.
You cannot prove that.
It was not good. I'm envious of the listener and watcher that didn't have to see it.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings prospects. Oh God, podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley, and we're going to have fun today. I can already tell vibes are high because we're going to be going over the Red Wings' top 10 NHL prospects and what is more exciting than talking about the future, Scotty. It's one of our favorite things, and a prospect could be anything, even a boat. So we're going to have a lot of fun on today's episode, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yeah, and so it's going to be pretty straightforward, right? We're going to give you guys our top 10 prospects. We're going to go from 10 to 1 to hide the obvious slam dunk at number 1 until the end. And Scotty, a couple things of note before we get into this. Two guys that we are not counting in our top 10 are going to be Berggren and Albert Johansson. I want to address this now before we get into it. That is because, well, one, for Berggren, it's a lot more obvious. He played 67 games at the NHL level. He's not even qualified as a rookie anymore. And his ELC is up, and he's 23 years old. Albert Johansson's ELC is up. He's 23 years old. To us, they are not NHL prospects anymore. So that's why those two guys will not be included. If we were to include them, they'd be on this list. I want to put that out there. They would be on this list if we were to include them, but we did not. But with that being said, Scotty, is there anything else we need to add to let the people know in regards to this list before we get off and running?
I don't think so. No, that's the notable one, but I'm really excited. This is always a fun conversation. Everybody always has a different, varying opinions on who's ahead of who. And there's also the ever familiar on this show conversation of, what do you prioritize or what do you rank more in prospect rankings, like floor or ceiling? Do you want someone who's like, oh, they're guaranteed to make the NHL, or somebody who, maybe it's a long shot, but could end up being really, really good? It's always a fascinating conversation. So.
Yeah, and that's really what it is current track record for player versus perceived ceiling, and we're going to try and strike a balance of those two things. But in the end, it's all pretty subjective as well. We're gonna end up splitting a lot of hairs. You could interchange a lot of these guys, but let's stop talking about it. Let's start at number 10. Scotty, why don't you lead us off with who we got at 10?
Yeah, we're going to go with Dmitry Buchelnikov at number 10. This is somebody that we talked about, when was that? When we talked about McKean's prospect list probably 2 months ago, maybe. And he's a guy that has really, he was a second-round pick in 2022 and has really kind of gotten on more and more radars, I would say, over the last 12 to 16 months. And he, I don't know, in terms of like excitement and again, like momentum in the fan base, I would say he's honestly one of the guys that's risen the fastest, right? Like if we did this list, I don't know, a year ago, I don't think he would have been in consideration for a top 10 spot. But now when you look across the board, he is in most top 10s when you look at people ranking Red Wings prospects. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy we overlooked on our rankings last year. I remember we didn't have him in our top 10, and some people were like, how do you not include him? And to be real with you, again, playing in the KHL, there's not a lot of opportunity for us to see clips on this kid. But since then, we've paid closer attention to Buchelnikov. He had 29 points in 55 games this last year with Vladivostok in the KHL on a loan. That was, from what I understand, a bad KHL team, and he was still over half point a game with that team. This kid is all flash, man. He's all flash and sizzle in the offensive zone. He's got incredible hands and incredible scoring touch. He just needs an opportunity to show it. And this year he's going to Moscow region of the KHL, which is a better team from what I understand, because my knowledge of the KHL isn't strong. But this will give him more support, kind of similar to what we saw out of Nate Danielson this year when he went to a better team in the Portland Winterhawks, and his scoring saw an uptick. So I think this is going to be a really good year for Buchnikov, and I think he's earned the number 10 ranking on here. But there are a lot of guys. You could convince me about 5 different players at number 10. Yeah. That's how deep the Red Wings prospect rankings are. At number 9, Scotty, if you're comfortable, we can move on from our 5'10" left wing in Buchnikov. We can talk about... He's so comfortable right now. Shai Buim, a defensive prospect. He was taken second round, 36th overall by the Detroit Red Wings in 2021. He's 6'3", left shot, 220-pound prospect for the Detroit Red Wings because Yzerman likes him big. He won, I believe, 2 championships with the University of Denver before going to the Griffins on a PTO. He only played 1 game with the Griffins before the season ended, though, so let's not talk too much about his Griffins stint. He'll be a full-time Griffin this year coming up. In his 3 years with the University of Denver, he got better and better and better. 18 points, 21 points, 36 points in 39, 38, and 43 games played. Shai Buim is... I firmly am of the belief now he will be an NHL defenseman at some point in his career for how much they were relying on him in the University of Denver. He's number 9. He's very good.
Yeah, it's a beauty, that number 9. No, I honestly, like, this is a guy I am unbelievably excited to see in a full year at Grand Rapids. And I think that, I mean, we talk about the depth in the defensive, I don't know, like pipeline throughout this organization, but he's a guy that is really, really exciting and is, again, like, obviously we saw his brother get drafted this year. But like, this is a guy that I'm thrilled to watch for a full year in GR, just because I'm with you. I think that this is kind of a candidate to, not that he's going to be in the NHL or anything this upcoming season, but he's a candidate to really turn some heads. And if he continues to progress, we could have that conversation the year after next.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys who's got a very good ability to find guys in passing lanes, create fake shots as well on the offensive blue line, but is smooth on the zone exits as well. So he's kind of he's a two-way defenseman, which is something, again, that Yzerman really likes in guys that he is drafting. Because we got 10 guys to get to, let's try and get to number 8 here as well. Kind of going to fly through the early ones so we can talk a little bit more about the higher numbered guys, the guys higher on our list. At number 8, we have a guy we know and love very much here on this podcast, and we had on the podcast just a few weeks ago, Carter Mazur. He was drafted 3rd round and number 70 in the 2021 draft. He has risen very fast among prospect rankings for a guy drafted in the 3rd round. 6 foot tall, 6 foot nothing, 172 pounds, right shooting left wing. And I mean, if you guys paid any attention to the Griffins this year, you know Carter Mazur is a dog. He obviously won a championship with the University of Denver, that first championship. He went to the Grand Rapids Griffins at the end of last season, and this was his first full year of professional hockey, and it started slow, to his own admission. And then he turned it on in the second half and became a pivotal piece of their top 6 in the playoffs as well. Ended up with 37 points in 60 games played, and then 8 points in 9 games played in the playoffs with the Griffins. Carter Mazur is going to be an NHL player, if not this year, the year after. He is going to be an NHL player, and that is why he is in our top 10, because he has, and as a 3rd round player, kind of beaten the odds, because most of your 3rd round players don't make it to the NHL, and he has quickly become one of our most exciting prospects.
Yeah, this is kind of the poster child for the conversation I had at the beginning of the show, right? Where it's, what do you grade higher, ceiling or floor? Because Carter Mazur is an NHL player. He is an NHL winger. He will be, I mean, by our approximation, he'll be in the NHL this season. He will be contributing in that bottom 6, but there's a reason that he has a clearer path, despite being lower on this list, than, I don't like Marco Kasper, right? Like, not a huge spoiler. He's pretty high on the list. Like, the reason why is because of the perceived ceiling, right? Carter Mazur is a grinded out, gritty hockey player that's going to be really valuable to this team, but that probably puts his peak at like at absolute best, probably a middle six, a really productive middle six player. Whereas, when he makes the NHL and breaks onto the team, he's probably going to be in the bottom six, and they're not going to have an issue with that because that's the type of role that he's probably going to be in relatively long term. So I think that this is a really, what do you value higher when you make these lists? And we're obviously not saying that like this is, gospel and whatnot. If you disagree, that's great.
You should definitely not think we're gospel.
Right.
Absolutely
100%.
not.
And so, but this is like the player that really proves that point, right? Like if you're like, hey, a guaranteed NHL player is a guaranteed NHL player, then he's going to be way higher on your list. But if you're leaning more in, okay, what's the best possible outcome, right? Like what's the 80th percentile outcome? What's the 90th, 100th percentile outcome for these guys? Then I think that he's probably closer to where we have him. But the reason that he's in the top 10 period is because we know we're going to get a really solid, at least bottom six NHLer out of him.
Right, precisely. Absolute peak, middle six, but more than likely bottom six. And that's why he's eighth, because while he has the proven track record in the AHL, likelihood of him doing it at the NHL isn't as high, but he will be productive in his bottom six role with the Detroit Red Wings.
17 and 20 this year.
He was very good for the Griffins, and he's earned his spot in the top 10 here for us. We got to do a quick break. We could talk Carter Mazur for 20 minutes, but we can't. So we got to do a quick break, and then we'll give you number 7 on the other side. So stay tuned for Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We're breaking down our top 10 Red Wings prospects. I keep wanting to say Locked On Red Wings prospects in this episode. Scotty, we are on number 7. Who do we have at 7 for the Detroit Red Wings?
Yeah, we're gonna take a dip into the goalie pond here at number 7, and Trey Augustine is going to be, and I think that there is a little bit. We talked off air before about the conversation between Augustine and Mazur, and that's probably a pretty close comparison there. But at the end of the day, again, if we're comparing ceilings, you would like to think that Augustine's ceiling is being a starting goalie in the NHL, at least right now. But it also is a testament to how difficult it is to compare prospect goalies to prospect skaters. It is very difficult. That really comes down to a subjective opinion of what you value more on a night-to-night basis. But Augustine has gained a lot of steam, probably one of the only players that, I don't want to say that can rival Dimitri there, but just in general, it has gained a lot of steam and has risen a lot over the last year-ish in the eyes of Red Wings fans. Obviously a Michigan State product and had a really good season for a really good Michigan State team. I believe he had a .915 save percentage and a goal against of sub-3. So obviously he was on Team USA as well. Got to see him a little bit there. Did really well in the U20s. Just in general, fantastic last calendar year for Trey Augustine. You will find few prospects in the organization that have risen in this list more than probably Trey.
Right, and I think it's important too to state like that was a Michigan State team going into this year that had been toiling in mediocrity for
Right.
what 5-6 years it feels like. And he goes there. I'm not going to say Augustine is solely the reason why they turned it around, but I don't think it's astonishing to say that Augustine's performance helped a big part in their turnaround. Obviously, getting new coaching and getting better recruiting helps a lot too. That was probably the biggest reason, and Augustine being one of those recruits. But to go there as a rookie, play 35 games, a freshman, I should say, and put up a 915 save percentage. I mean, that's nothing short of amazing. Like, they made it to the NCAA tournament in large part because of his success. And, taken in the second round last year, he was the 41st pick by the Detroit Red Wings. He was taken out of the National Development Program. So he was somebody that I'm sure the Red Wings were very intimately familiar with, considering that he played down the road in Plymouth. And so they knew they were getting a high caliber prospect when they got him. But goalies, we always say it, goalies are weird when it comes to developing. But he didn't miss a beat going from the development team right to college and NCAA, where some of your best prospects come out of these days, is the NCAA, college hockey, and played toe-to-toe with some of the best other goaltenders in the league and, of course, best teams in the NCAA as well. And as you put it, he played in parts of 4 different games in the World Championship after Lyon got injured and left, and posted a 929 in a very, very small sample size because there were parts of 4 different games. But a very small sample size. He put up a 929 save percentage with Team USA, with NHL players. So there is he is a very promising goalie prospect and gives you much needed depth at a very important position should the worst case scenario happen and Sebastian Cossa doesn't work out. But you and I do not believe he won't. Let's move on from there. We have Cossa and Sandin-Pellikka, the first round pick to make the list. He is at 6th on our list. He was taken 17th overall by the Red Wings in 2023. So obviously, again, first round. 5'11", 185 pounds, right shooting, offensive defenseman. He played in the SHL last year, and he in 39 games played, he had 18 points. He is just an incredibly offensively talented defenseman, which is something that the Red Wings prospect pool sorely lacks. And when you talk about, this is a guy whose ceiling and floor could not be further apart, I feel. Like, his absolute ceiling could be a rock star, like top 4 offensive-minded defenseman, but it's just he's so raw still. And if if those tools don't translate to the NHL level, and his defensive, not to say he's not defensively capable, but he's not the same caliber as defensively capable as, your Albert Johansson or your Simon Edvinsson. If those tools don't develop, then you could be looking at, a sheltered third pair power play defenseman. And that's where I think you have the conversation between ceiling and floor.
No, absolutely. That's my sentiments almost exactly. I think that he obviously, like you said, has the potential to be a very, very high-end and productive defenseman at the level. It's just right now there's still a lot of question marks in the road of his development. This is not a guy like Carter Mazur, for instance, who we know is going to be in the NHL probably this upcoming season and is kind of knocking on the door. ASP still has quite a decently long road in development ahead of him. He's not going to be here anytime soon still. So I think that's probably why you see him further down. But again, to just regurgitate the same point, like if you are really big on just who has the highest ceiling, then ASP is right up there, honestly, with some of the tops in this entire top 10.
He was a first round pick.
There's such a variance about where he stands. And again, there's so much more time. We need to see so much more of a sample size. We need to see him even play in North American ice before, he probably flies up this list. But this is a guy that could rise rather very quickly, right? If he comes over next year, for instance, and plays in Grand Rapids and lights it up, you're going to see him, toward the top or even at the top of a lot of these lists.
Yeah, Scotty, I completely agree with you. It's just one of those situations where it's, absolute ceiling could be superstar, but also if the absolute floor could be, like I said, third pair sheltered power play defenseman.
Right.
So it really depends on where his development goes from here, and that's where you have that conversation of balancing the what we've seen versus what he could be as well. Scotty, let's move on. I know we got to get to a break here, but let's knock out one more. I believe it's your turn to introduce a player. So who do we have at number 5?
Is it my turn?
Didn't I do Cossa Sandin-Pellikka?
Sure. Yeah. So I genuinely didn't remember. So next up we have our newly acquired, is that the word? I guess newly drafted first round pick. MBN is going to slide in next here. I think that this is another guy where it's just so early in the development process that we need to see him just suit up in general as a member of the Red Wings organization, period, before maybe he's a lot higher. But I know some people are really high on him, and we're really high on him. He's the guy that we wanted them, the Wings, to draft. They did it. That's awesome. We celebrated the pick. This is just a case of there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of intangibles as well, things that you can't necessarily teach with, the size and speed and the shot and everything that he has. But I think it's still just very early on in development, and the guys ahead of him are just in a spot where it's like, okay, we're pretty confident these are like high end, potential to be really high end players in the NHL as well, or higher end, I guess. Whereas MBN could end up being a solid middle six guy, which again is really valuable to the organization. That was a big, I don't want to say controversy, but it was a big talking point on draft night, right? With Yzerman and some other players that were still on the board when the Wings picked. Some people didn't want MBN because they wanted the Wings to take more of a big swing on somebody that could end up having a much lower floor, but also could be, a really high-end player. And the Wings went quote-unquote safer, which, again, we don't have a problem with, and we celebrated the pick, and I think it's a great pick. But that's why he finds himself here and maybe not higher, despite being the new, fresh toy of a first-round pick that we have.
Right, and we actually disagreed a little bit on the placement of MBN because I had him a spot higher, switched with who we decided to go with at number 4. And so when it comes to that conversation we just had with ASP, his ceiling and floor are pretty close, I believe. It's like the opposite. MBN, I think, worst case scenario is middle 6, best case scenario is top 6, which is, when you talk about it, that's like what? Lines 1 or 2 versus lines 2 or 3. Right. It's one line.
Right.
I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'1", 207 pounds already at just 18 years old, with more time to grow and more time to fill out, which is scary to think. Incredibly physical, very aggressive forechecker, something the Red Wings really needed on the right wing where they didn't have a lot of depth. And he has an incredible shot. The biggest factor for me that is going to decide whether he's top 6 or middle 6 is if that incredible shot that he has can turn into consistent production.
Right.
Because this last year, in Hockey Allsvenskan, and he'll be going to the SHL, the top pro league in Sweden, one of the top pro leagues in the world. He only had 8 goals, despite the fact that he has an incredible shot. And I know at international competition with the World Juniors and the World Championships, he proved a lot more consistent. 3 goals in 5 games at the U20s, and then 3 goals in 7 at the World Championship. That's a lot better rate of production than the 8 goals he scored in 41 games in Hockey Allsvenskan. So I have faith that that shot will turn to goals. It's just we need to see it. If that shot, that incredible shot, turns into more consistent production, he will be a top 6 because he has everything else going for him. He's responsibly defensively, aggressive forechecker. He's not afraid to use his body to protect the puck. He's got good skating. He's got, like you said, a lot going for him. So it's just that one aspect. If that can turn over into consistent production, I think he will be a top 6. And then I'll feel vindicated at having...
Could fly up our list, given that, especially like number 1's going to graduate from prospect status. And then on top of that, you have we haven't seen him play yet as a part of the Red Wings organization. So, it could take half a season and this guy could be 3. It's just post-draft, this is where he slides in.
So we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we will do our top 4. And if you haven't heard who we've talked about, it should be, or if you have heard who we already have talked about, it should be pretty obvious who's in our top 4. And we'll debate why in segment 3 of Locked on Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which is back. And the Tigers won the first series back from the All-Star break. They're staying hot. So if you want to catch them while they're still hot before they cool down, you got to use Game Time with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat. Their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying baseball tickets. Save up to 60% off buying those last minute for sports, comedy, and concerts with last minute deals. And you can save even more on top of that with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And when you use their zone deals and you let Game Time choose the section or choose the seats when you choose the section. And of course, that lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same seats in a different row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, at number 4, we have our second goaltender, Sebastian Cossa. He was the second first-round pick the Detroit Red Wings had in 2021, taken 15th overall, just like MBN, a pick before. And Sebastian Cossa is a guy who has been up and down on people's rankings year after year as he's adjusted to each subsequent level. And he is a guy that I have been up and down with as well, going back to his season in the ECHL, his slow start, picking up, finishing hot. Training camp, he didn't look good. Slow start in the AHL, finishing hot. It's been a roller coaster with Sebastian Cossa, as it normally is with goaltenders. And when it comes to ranking goalies as well, it's always so hard to put them juxtaposed to position players. On my initial list, I had him at 5 and MBN at 4, and then we talked, and I think when you take into account, and this is something you brought up, so full credit to you, when we're talking about what we've seen already, and you compare that to perceived ceiling, he has both, and that is why he is at 4. He finished every subsequent year. Sebastian Cossa has gotten better. He's adjusted to the league he has been in, and he has gotten better. He had a .913 save percentage with the Toledo Walleye, and then made the jump to the AHL, and then had a .913 save percentage in a much better AHL Grand Rapids Griffins, and was very good. Had one stinker in the playoffs with the Grand Rapids Griffins, which tanked his save percentage, but still finished with a .900 save percentage in 9 games played with the Griffins during the playoffs. He's a guy who has the ceiling to be an NHL starter still, and is getting ever closer. At 6'6", dude, that's the other thing. He's huge. At 6'6" of being an NHL starter, while he is developing it and getting better and proving himself at every level.
Yeah, I think this is one, like you said, that we were one place off on, and I think this is just again like a case where best case scenario for Cossa is he's your goalie of the future, and like that is just so unbelievably valuable if he is to hit that. Now, I know that like you said, there have been questions about that. I have maintained a pretty rare case, a pretty level head with Cossa specifically throughout his development, right? Like this is one where you just can't get like too high with the highs or too lows with the lows when it comes to goalie development, really development in general, but goalie development specifically, because there's such adjustments when you go from one level to the next. And I think that throughout, I've kind of maintained, like, you know, people really overreact to one game sample sizes a lot of the times. And if you look at the body of work as a whole, like you said, he has continued to improve year after year after year. I think there's an outside chance he makes his NHL debut this season. And I think regardless of what he does this season, whether he makes the NHL roster or not, I think next year we're talking about, okay, do we even need to sign a goalie, or do we just have, you know, our starting goalie going into the season, depending on how good he does in GR this season. So yeah, I'm super excited about him. I even had in the back of my head like an argument for him being higher, but I think this is a pretty good spot for him.
Yeah, because the next three guys are all top 10 picks for the Detroit Red Wings. So, Scotty, who's at number 3?
Number 3, we're going to go with Marco Kasper. Obviously, there's a little bit of a conversation surrounding Kasper. Number 1, there's not a conversation, but surrounding Kasper and Danielson, who, no, it's not really a spoiler to say that those are the guys we're looking at next. And yeah, I think that this is Kasper. Everybody's really excited about it, and really solid, high level, hopefully two-way forward at the NHL level. I think there are going to be some conversations about whether long-term you can put him up the middle. Even if you can't, he'll be a solid winger. I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited when it comes to Marco Kasper. I think he's another guy that you could see at the NHL level at some point this season. But yeah, I know that a lot of people are excited about him. We're excited about him. And I can't wait to see him push for a roster spot. That'd be really fun.
I mean, best case scenario, middle six center. Worst case scenario, I think middle six winger, right? Like, this is one of those guys who will either stick at center or transition to the side. At 6'1", he's another guy who's not afraid of using his body. He can be physical. He's very smart with the puck as well, and is not afraid to go to the net. And he started out slow with Grand Rapids, but finished strong. He ended up with 35 points in 71 games with the Grand Rapids Griffins this last year, and had 7 points in 9 games in the playoffs. Mazur, and Berggren were the 3 most consistent players for the Griffins in the playoffs, and he and Mazur were always making plays happen for those around them. Kasper is going to be an NHL-level player. His floor, I think, is middle six. His ceiling is middle six. It just depends on what side he's going to be on. Will he be in the middle, or will he be on the side? The only reason and the only thing that's keeping him at 3 rather than 2 is still I am not sure the scoring is there at a consistent level. And I guess we can use this as a good transition into talking about splitting hairs between 2 and 3. I think Danielson, who is our number 2 rated prospect, still has a higher ceiling in terms of goal scoring capability. Danielson, again, another guy who's considered a two-way center like Marco Kasper, I think has a little bit higher end scoring. And I think this year going from a bad Brendan Wheat Kings team where he had 26 and 26, he was already a point per game on a bad team, then going to the Portland Winterhawks and being 2 points a game nearly with them in 41 and 28 games played, and an incredible playoff appearance where he had 24 and 18 and lost in the WHL championship. And again, hugely different leagues, right? I mean, WHL's juniors. AHL is one of the best pro leagues in the world. Big difference there. But I think what we saw out of Danielson is a higher ceiling scoring than anything we've seen out of Kasper so far, which is why when you're comparing 2 players who are both considered two-way middle six ceiling centers, I tend to go with Danielson at 2 because I think that the scoring is more promising with Danielson.
Yeah, no, I mirror your sentiments. This was, again, we made our own lists and then compared and kind of moved around. So we had one consensus list, but we made 2 of our own individually and then compared and contrasted, and we both had the top 3 were identical for both of us. We both had Danielson at 2 and Kasper at 3. So I agree with you. I think that you just have to give the nod to the higher potential goal scoring output. And the reason why you have to do that, or I guess I shouldn't say have to, but the reason why we do that is because Danielson is still a good defender, right? It'd be one thing if it was like, oh, they're 2 completely different styles, right? Like Danielson is just this goal scorer and he's a liability on defense. And Marco Kasper is this great two-way, not as good of a goal scorer maybe, but is a really high-end defensive forward. Like Danielson just has the potential to produce more points and is still a solid defender as well. And so I think that, again, when you're talking about the best case scenario for him, it's production on a lot of production on both sides. Whereas Kasper, best case scenario is still the same, right? Good, solid production on both sides. But I think the ceiling is just a little bit higher for Danielson as it stands right now.
Yeah, I think that pretty well summarizes it. Obviously, they're not one-for-one players. I think Danielson's a little bit got more speed and is better through the neutral zone and in the offensive zone. While I do think Danielson is a good two-way center, I do think Kasper is a little bit better defensively because of the way he plays the game. But I just think that Danielson at 2 and Kasper at 3, I mean, you might be splitting hairs. I wouldn't fight anyone who wants to put Kasper above Danielson, but that's just where we stand right now. Right. And again, next year, it could be different. I think last year we had Kasper above Danielson, right? And Danielson at that point was the newest prospect. But a year's worth of watching a player and like watching his game can change your opinion. See Buchnikov. Anyways, number 1, Scotty, slam dunk.
Not
right?
much of a conversation, so that's good for us because we're running long here. But it's pretty easy.
There was no way this wasn't going to be a long episode.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Edvinsson is the clear number 1 here, as long as you consider him a prospect still, which if you don't, then just remove him and slide everybody up 1, and there you go. But I think as it stands right now, this is still, we are waiting for his first legitimate long-standing stint in the NHL, and so we continue to put him on this list despite maybe not having rookie status currently. And the hope for him, is that he has a really good first full season and that he's a really solid second pair. And I think the hope long term is that he's a high end, like borderline elite defender for on your blue line for years to come.
I mean, you're looking at a situation here where day 1 of the NHL season, he is your second best defenseman on your team as functionally a rookie. I know technically he doesn't meet rookie standards anymore because he played 2 straight seasons of 6 games or more and a cumulative 25, which doesn't make him, Calder eligible anymore. But he's still functionally a rookie because he only had 2 short stints in the NHL. I mean, you're looking at a situation where a rookie is your second best defenseman on night 1. Right. Absolute floor, second pair defenseman, I think. Absolute ceiling, top pair defenseman. I mean, there's not a lot of wiggle room between those 2 things. And at the end of the season, he could be Mort Seider's partner, depending on how they want to parse this out. You already know he's defensively responsible. He's big, and he's not afraid to use his size to intimidate people. I think his ceiling as a point producer is probably lower than Seider's, maybe 35 to 45 range. But that's still like really solid point production from a defenseman who, at worst case scenario, bottoms out as a second pair guy. Like as Simon Edvinsson is without a doubt your number 1 prospect, and this is the last year he'll be on this list because this time next year he will be a full-time NHLer, right. And we'll be having conversations about whether or not he and Seider should be playing together full-time, which is what we all dream as the ultimate goal. So, I mean, it's kind of those crazy things, like you get so excited to talk about a player, but like everyone knows Simon Edvinsson, so there's not much more to say about Simon Edvinsson because we all know what to expect from him at this point. He's going to be there.
Exactly.
So, I mean, they were playing him on the second pair in the most important stretch of the season when they were trying to clinch a playoff spot. Like that's not nothing.
Right. Yeah. No, like I said, I know I've said it in negative connotation lately, but it works the flip side as well, man. The organization will tell you how they feel about somebody.
Absolutely. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts?
I do not, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode, tomorrow, we're thinking. We're thinking maybe we take Friday off. That's our goal right now. So stay tuned for that. Maybe bring you some special team lines. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.